The reason for this is because if the tenant keeps on taking their mount out every time the new tenant comes in, the wall's going to basically look like it was used for target practice. The other thing too with tenancies and that is, as much as we've all been told through school that we're special and we're different and we're unique little snowflakes, we're not. Most people put the TV at the same place every time. Same with pictures and mirrors and stuff like this. If you walk into a place, most of the time, if that picture is removed, the next tenant will put a picture or a mirror or something there as well. Hello, and welcome to the show. My name is Hayes, and this is Bamboo, Vancouver's property management and investment podcast. Today, we're going to be discussing the March stats that have come out, as well as where the market's going in general, although we don't have a crystal ball, of course, as well as some tips for saving your walls, and what exactly defines a shadow and what defines a fixture in a place. So we'll be covering all this throughout the show. So overall, thanks for coming and checking us out. So we'll jump right into it. As we had mentioned earlier podcast, the rental market seems to be kind of leveling out a bit. The decrease from $59 was from December till March now. So it's not a huge waverance that we've been dealing with. And our friends at live.rent have shown that the decrease on their site has just been a mere $8 from April to March. So overall, if you take a look at the graph, generally the rental prices have generally slowed down a little bit. They're on the level even keel here. So I don't think that there's going to be too much more downward pressure. That being said, of course, there's a whole bunch of things going on in the world right now. So who knows exactly what it's going on, but my gut feeling and from what we've been looking at from the previous stats show that the numbers have been kind of level and not pushing down too much. So I think we're kind of near the bottom is the main point with that. These numbers, of course, are a high overview. So they do range between all the cities, all the products. We generally base all of the number stats on 1-bedroom unfurnished units, since that's essentially the base model, if you will. Obviously, 2 bedrooms are more expensive and 3 bedrooms are more expensive. And it does range from city to city. So generally, the more east you get, the cheaper it is, but we'll touch on that in a bit. Speaking to a bunch of colleagues in the industry, they've all said that their phones have also slowed down a bit. We were humming last month in April. It seems that it has slowed down a bit during March. We're kind of thinking that it's either combination of tax time, everyone's kind of battening down the hatches and getting that prepared to get ready to pay the government all the money that they want to take from us, as well as there is spring break going on. So we are thinking that a bit of the slowdown is a combination of tax time and spring break. Nothing unusual. So we'll see if this picks up again. But overall, if your place hasn't been getting a lot of phone calls in the past couple weeks, don't fret too much. It seems to be like that across the board, so it probably isn't just your place. That being said, of course, pricing in our current conditions is a major factor. We've been inundated with warnings of inflation, and we can see the gas prices going up. As of today, I see them all at $2.13 a liter, which is pretty high. So want to make sure that you are pricing yourself in the range that you should be. So maybe revisit your pricing just to make sure that you're on par with what's going on in that. As well as anybody who's got places for rent that's near the SkyTrain, make sure to include that in your write-up and make it more prevalent there, simply for the fact that, as I had just mentioned, with the gas prices, people may be starting to think about taking their car off the road. So if you can advertise that you're near mass transit, such as the SkyTrain, it may get more people interested in it, since they may be dropping from 2 cars to 1 car, or maybe getting rid of the car altogether, simply for the fact that currently there's not much end in sight for what's going on in Iran, as well as the fact that we're just getting inundated all the time, that everything's more expensive and inflation and so on and so forth. It's causing a real feeling of fear amongst people who are shopping for anything, really, from rents all the way to clothing and food. So do take a look at that. Pricing will be more on point than previously, simply for the fact that we're living in more of a fear-based economy right now. This is also an interesting thing that has come up lately with landlords. So it's a ponder for landlords, actually. We've been getting a lot of people that are trying to charge extra for their storage lockers that are already attached to the unit. Now, in a lot of cases, you purchase an apartment, it comes with one parking and one storage. And so some landlords are getting their lockers free now and wanting to charge extra to the tenants for it after the fact when the tenants already moved in. So what the ponder is as a landlord, is it worth the extra $100 or so for the locker, or is it worth it just to have good favor with the tenants so that, later on down the tenancy, if a part is taking a little longer than it should for repair or any of these sort of things, which one's worth more? I personally am in the school that it's better to not nickel and dime your tenants, simply for the fact that you can get that $100 later on when you do your rent increase the following year. And it just puts out good favor with the tenants and makes for a better relationship, which generally means that your tenant stays longer, takes better care of the place, and is happier, not as pushy if anything is going on in the unit. So, it's everybody's thought to stop and consider that, but do consider that sometimes there is more value in a stronger, healthier relationship than there is with squeezing out that extra $50 to $100 for something that is otherwise going to sit empty in the basement of your condo. So just a ponder for the landlords out there that are listening, and something that you may want to take into consideration when you're deciding if you want to try to squeeze more out of a tenant, because there's already a bit of a tough position between landlords and tenants, which there shouldn't be, but it's there, and maybe smoothing that over and being known as a good landlord, a happy landlord, will produce a happy tenant and a better relationship with your tenant. So just some food for thought, something to consider. As of yesterday, the Bank of Canada did hold their rates. Not really a surprise, being with everything going on, as I mentioned earlier, with the Strait of Hormuz and everything going on in Iran. We are seeing the calls of possible inflation issues coming up in that. So the Bank of Canada will be holding tight. And there is even some talk of possibly increasing the interest rates. So we'll see how that develops over time. But hopefully it either stays or drops, which would pick up the sales market a little bit more, we're hoping. But we'll see what happens. As I said earlier, the fear that is being pushed around right now is going to slow up the sales market, I would suggest, and will also slow up the rental market in turn, simply for the fact that people are not going to know if they're going to be able to keep their jobs. And again, with all the tariffs and everything else going on in the States, it's quite uneasy and not really easy to follow. So we'll see how that happens and what goes on, but that's basically where we're at as far as the Bank of Canada with their interest rates. Now, going on with the rentals itself, unsurprisingly, apartments are taking up 70% of the rental market. That's typical in most cities, simply for the fact that we have more apartments than houses because we're running out of land. So the least three expensive cities, though, is in third place is New Westminster. The second least expensive is in Langley, and the first is in Surrey. Now, previous shows, we have talked about how Surrey is missing a lot of their demographic, new Canadians as well as students, with the UBC SFU campuses out near Surrey Central in particular, where there is a large cluster of homes, generally apartments, of course. So that is probably what is driving the Surrey prices down as far as rentals, as well as in sales. So if you are looking to get into the market, Surrey has got a lot of good deals out there right now for you. So definitely check that out, as well as, Surrey is developing quite nicely. It always had a really bad rap, but it is picking up in more things, better restaurants, more entertainment, that sort of stuff is coming out there. So check out Surrey if you're looking for a good deal. So we had talked about the start of the show about what the difference is between a fixture and a chattel. Now, simply put, a chattel is something that's easily moved. So basically, if it's attached to the wall, floor, the unit itself via screws or any other means that would damage either the item or what it's affixed to, then that is basically a fixture. That's the easiest way. There are some gray areas, whereas a chattel is something that you can easily move. So things such as a toaster or a computer or even a fridge, actually, because you can just unplug it and roll it out. So those are your main differences between a fixture and a chattel. One of the things that does also come into play, which is some of the gray area, is if the item would be useless on its own. So an example would be if you had a crane that rolled along some rails that were affixed to the unit. If you take that crane off, it's no longer functional because it has no way to roll along those rails. So therefore, that would make that a fixture because it's useless on its own. The best way to avoid this, of course, is to specify. There's no harm in writing things down, asking, and really oversimplifying all of it. And just ask, even if it seems like a stupid question, if it's written down, everybody's on the same page, and then there's no confusion afterwards, because surprises in contracts are never good and usually end up costing you money. We do want to take into account, though, as well, that as far as tenancy rules, if a tenant comes in and puts up a shelf, they can take that fixture with them because it belongs to them and doesn't make it suddenly part of the unit that they're renting. Of course, the tenant will have to fill the hole and sand it. So that is one of the things. So don't expect that if a tenant puts up a whole great shelving system that it's going to stay there once the tenant leaves. So do make sure of that. As well as a landlord, understand that the tenant is not required to paint. So they will put some holes in the walls for their shelves and then have to fill and sand them before they go. So do take that into account, as well as the fact that you don't want painting to happen generally afterwards anyways, because over time, the paint gets oxidized, it gets hit by the sun, and even if you use the exact same can, it will end up looking like polka dots anyways. So just take that into account, that once there's a shelf up from a tenant, it will go with them, and you won't have a free extra shelf is what the main point is there. This brings up another great tip for landlords, and we run into this a lot of times with TV mounts, because most people have now a wall-mounted TV since the technology is way better than those giant tube ones you used to have back in the day. So what a good way to go about this is for landlords is to mount a universal TV for the tenant ahead of time. Or when the tenant wants to mount their TV, they'll ask you, can we mount the TV wherever they want to put it in a brand new place, for instance? Offer to buy them one and put a universal mount in there. The reason for this is because if the tenant keeps on taking their mount out every time the new tenant comes in, the wall's going to basically look like it was used for target practice. The other thing too with tenancies and that is, as much as we've all been told through school that we're special and we're different and we're unique little snowflakes, we're not. Most people put the TV at the same place every time. Same with pictures and mirrors and stuff like this. If you walk into a place, most of the time, if that picture is removed, the next tenant will put a picture or a mirror or something there as well. So we all kind of operate the same way. There are some exceptions, of course, but overall, most of us put it the same way. So if someone's wanting to put up their TV, chances are the next person's going to want to put it there, and the next and the next. So just go ahead and spend the money, have it done properly, and that way you only have to do it once so that your wall doesn't just get drilled and filled over and over and over, because eventually it's just going to look like trash. So that's one of the best tips for a landlord to make sure to protect your investment by not putting extra holes in it if you can. Well, we basically covered everything that we need to cover for the March stats. If you have been listening for this long, thank you very much for tuning in. My name is Hayes. This has been Bamboo, Vancouver's Property Management and Investment Podcast.